There are two terms that are usually used interchangeably in this part. No? Yung the global economy and economic globalization. So, aalamin natin kung ano ba yung pagkakaiba nitong dalawang terms na to. The term global economy is a very broad term that refers to all the countries who are participating in the economy of the world. So, nandun yung mga economic drivers of the world. Global economy and economic globalization are two usually interchanged terms. The global economy refers to the all the countries who are contributing to the economy or economy of the world. Ito namang economic globalization, this is a process. So global economy is a noun and economic globalization is a process. The United Nations defines it as the increasing interdependence of world economies as a result of the growing scale of cross-border trade of commodities and services, the flow of international capital, and a widespread use of technology. Economic globalization can also be defined as the dramatic changes or increase in global trade in a span of a few decades. So it is a process which happens not in a year, not in a quarter, but it happens in a few decades. So it is a long period of time. So from being a underdeveloped country, for example, to an industrialized country, that happens in a span of a few decades. According to the United Nations Conference on Trade and Development, or UNCTAD, the amount of foreign direct investment flowing across the world, dati noong 1982, ang size ng global economy is around 57 billion US dollars. And after 40 years, by 2015, that number has increased to 1.76 trillion. Anong ibig sabihin nun? Yung dating 57 billion, tuloy-tuloy yung paglaki nito in 3 decades to 4 decades. And yung size niya, nag-triple siya. So that is the process of economic globalization. What is trade and why do different economies trade with each other? First, let us define kung ano nga ba ang trade. Last time no, napag-usapan natin kung mabubuhay ba tayo kapag may trading, and marami sa atin ang sagot sa tanong na yun is hindi tayo mabubuhay because importation is very important. Kasi pag walang importation, we will go back to our lives in the caves. Trade can be defined as the concept of exchanging goods and services between two people or entities. So dalawang tao or dalawang kumpanya, nagpapalitan sila ng produkto, then that can simply be defined as trading. Pero if we apply it in a wider scale, pang buong mundo ang peg niya, so that will be called international trade. International trade can be defined as the concept of exchange between people and entities in two different countries. So trade lang siya kapag nasa micro level, pero pag buong mundo yung pinag-uusapan, that could be considered as international trade. Two countries, no? Dalawang bansa, international trade yun. The earliest wide-scale trading system that can be discussed is itong picture na to. So anybody from you who can tell me kung ano nga ba itong nasa picture na to, anong trading system ito? This has been existing since the 14th and 15th century.
Silk Road po.
Silk Road, correct. Yun si Rafael. Okay, thank you very much, Juan Rafael. This is the Silk Road. So, let's continue. The oldest known international trade is the Silk Road trade system. This is a network of pathways in the ancient world that spanned from China to what is now Middle East and Europe. Balikan natin yung picture. So the red lines dito I'd like to highlight the red lines here. Ito lang talaga yung Silk Road na nauna. Because the early Silk Road ay gumamit lamang ng lupa. Traders traveled by land and not by sea. Mamaya, yung may extension niya na blue, uh, yun na yung naging trading system which came after during the period of exploration, which used ships, and hindi na lang sila naglalakad or hindi na lang sila gumagamit ng mga kabayo when they traveled through the Silk Road. Silk was during that time kasi ang silk is a very important commodity. No? If we all know, yung silk nang galing yan sa China, na-invento yan sa China. Sino dito ba nakakaalam kung paano ginagawa ang silk?
Galing po sa silkworms, tapos yung yung pinoproduce po nilang um, basta yun po.
Mhm.
Ito yung yung pinoproduce po ng silkworms, ayun po yung ginagamit nilang fiber para po makakreate ng silk cloth.
Yes, correct. So silk was a very important and very in-demand product during the time of the Silk Road. Kaya nakarating yung mga traders from China papuntang Middle East, papuntang India, and also Europe. The traders used Silk Road regularly from 130 before Common Era, when Chinese Han Dynasty opened trade to the West until 1453, when the Ottoman Empire closed it. So ito yung itsura ng silk. Ito medyo modern na silk na to. The silk is the basic cloth material for the clothing of the Chinese, and it was adapted by the Indians. No? So parehong mga silk yung gamit or materials ng kanilang national clothing right now. Siyempre sa Pilipinas na influensyahan din tayo niyan, no? Kasi nakarating din sa atin yung silk. Pero sa Pilipinas, ganito siya. Yan, cream silk. And sun silk. Joking aside. Pero marami tayong mga nakuha from the Chinese people kasi before the Spanish came into the Philippines, mga Chinese muna yung ating mga partners on trade. In fact, they had established the oldest Chinese settlement in the Philippines, in the world. Yun yung Binondo. Bago pa nakarating ang Chinese sa US, may Chinese settlement na sa Pilipinas. Maybe that's one of the factors kung bakit ang China kiniklaim nila historically na ang part of Philippines ay naging teritoryo or province ng China. They have reached as far as Sulu, they have reached the Visayas, they have reached Manila. We are part of the Chinese trade. No? These are the primary goods which were traded during the Silk Road period. Mula sa east or tayo sa region natin papuntang west, so ito yung silk, syempre, yung tea, yung dyes or pangkulay, precious stones, chinaware, porcelain, cinnamon, ginger, bronze, and gold artifacts. Medicines, ang Chinese, meron silang ancient medication. Perfumes, ivory, rice, paper, and gunpowder. Itong gunpowder, napaka-importante din during that time kasi after the Silk Road is age of exploration. So, yung mga Europeans who were traveling the world, they needed gunpowder. And gunpowder was invented in China. Accidentally. Ang gunpowder, na-invento yan sa loob ng kusina eh. So, fun fact. From west to east naman, of course, yung mga nagta-travel sa Silk Road papuntang west, may mga baon din sila pauwi ng east. So, these were slaves, they were horses, saddles, and riding track. May dala din sila mga grapes, domestic and exotic animals such as dogs, cats, honey, fruits, glassware, wooden blankets, rugs, and carpets, textiles, gold and silver, camels, weapons, and armor. So how did the Silk Road affect the rest of the world? No? So yung makikita natin yung map kanina na una, no, yung color red, no, mula sa China in the Far East, they would travel by land at nakakarating sila hanggang Europe in the West. No? In China, I'd like to highlight this one. In China, people engaged in silk production rather than doing anything else because the demand for silk grew and more people devoted their lives for silk production. Ang tawag dito sa phenomenon na ito is Dutch disease. No? Dutch disease. Ang ibig sabihin ng Dutch disease, wait, nawala yung time. Ang ibig sabihin ng Dutch disease is that one country would rather produce only one product which is in demand worldwide. No? Halimbawa sa Pilipinas, dati ang pinoproduce natin ay meron tayong onions, garlic, rice, uh, and then nagpo-produce din tayo ng mga shoes, yan, pineapples, bananas, mga exporter tayo ng bananas. Eh. But came the time when the nurses were very in demand worldwide. So, yung mga Filipinos, that was back in 1990s, no? Yung mga Pilipino, imbes na maging diversified yung ating industry, napakarami nating graduates in nursing because we were just focused on producing quality nurses that we can export worldwide. So, ang daming mga schools noon, bigla nag-offer ng nurse. Ang daming pinatayo na nursing schools na yung iba ay pinasara because of the low quality or low standard ng kanilang nursing program. No, so Dutch disease is the focusing in only one industry and forgetting the other industries. Ano pa ba yung mga ibang industries sa Pilipinas? Sa ibang bansa, nangyayari din yan, no? Especially in third world countries like in Africa. Alam mo, ang Africa hindi siya sustainable pagdating sa agriculture. Pero pagdating sa minerals and natural resources, napakayaman nila. That's why madalas nakakalimutan nila yung other sectors of their labor at nagpo-focus na lang sila sa mining. So pag-mining ng diamonds, pagmimina ng gold, pagmimina ng cobalt, nakakalimutan na nila yung magtanim para sa sarili nilang tao. Kaya nga in Africa, ang daming mga nagugutom na tao. Well, sa Pilipinas, marami rin nagugutom but it is much worse in Africa. Kasi nga, because of the Dutch disease. Or giving so much focus on only one industry. Another effect of the Silk Road to the world is yung ideology. Yung tinatawag nating Chinese philosophy. Of course, the most popular Chinese philosophy that was brought by the Chinese, una dyan is Confucianism and Buddhism. Usually, ang Buddhism, nire-refer natin siya as a religion, but Buddhism is not only a religion. It is a philosophy. Ito ay isang ideolohiya. Daming sikat na Western philosophers and Chinese philosophers, pero sa Pilipinas, wala masyadong philosopher. Pero meron tayong makapangyarihan na tao. Kung kaya niyang pigilin ang lindol, kaya niyang magsara ng estasyon. Huwag ko na sabihin yung pangalan. Si ano yun? Staff, sabi niya. Staff. Okay. Well, the Silk Road did not last for 2 centuries, pero umabot lang siya until the 15th century because of the crisis between China and the Mongolian and Ottoman Empire. So, pinasara siya ni Tamerlane. Nag-take over siya dun sa route kasi ang China, dadaan yan ng Mongolia and then dadaan ng India. Magka-cross ng East Asia papuntang Middle Eastern region. Tapos from the Middle East, cross siya ng border and mountains, makakarating sila ng Europe. So Tamerlane closed the routes until his death in 1400s. And then because of that crisis in that region, China closed its borders for the foreigners. So naging close ang China and tinayo ang Great Wall of China. No? If you remember our first module, yung solids, one example of solid is yung Great Wall of China because it stops the movement of people. After the closure of the Silk Road, dumating ang age of exploration. Sumikat yung mga European explorers from Portugal and Spain. During that time, ang pinakamakapangyarihan is Spain and Portugal. No? Kung natatandaan niyo yung Treaty of Tordesillas kung saan yung mundo hinati sa dalawa. So the question now is, ang Silk Road ba ay global? No? Titignan natin yung mga bansa na dinaanan ng Silk Road. Can we consider Silk Road as global?
No, sir.
Yes,
It's
Ryan.
international po.
Okay,
Kasi sabi po dun sa module, mako-consider natin na global ang isang trade kung nakakapunta siya overseas.
Okay,
Yan po.
correct. Kaya nandoon sa map natin kanina, yung blue na lines. No? Because if the Silk Road reached the routes in the seas, then we can consider that as international. However, hindi niya naabot yung paglalayag sa karagatan. So it was only international. Silk Road does not have ocean roads. Okay. So if the Silk Road, no matter how wide yung kanyang coverage, ay hindi na consider as global trade, what could be the trading system that can be considered as global? Mhm. The age of globalization began when all important populated continents began to exchange products continuously. The keyword there is continuously. Nagsimula ang globalization and global trading system in 1571 nung patag ang galleon trade. So this is an example of a galleon ship. So if you remember, syempre, ang galleon trade system ay isang ruta at mga barko na ng mga Espanyol galing sa Mexico papunta ng Manila. So yung kanilang mga ships, mga kanilang mga vapor ay may mga kargang mga iba-ibang produkto. Yung galing ng Mexico, dadalhin ng India, dadaan ng Singapore, papunta sa Pilipinas, and then pagdating sa Pilipinas, i-discarga yung mga produkto na yan, and then magkakarga ulit ng ibang produkto, galing naman sa Asia. So from west to east, and then pauwi, east to west. It included ocean routes. Okay, so yung kaninang map, allow me to go back, no? Balikan natin kasi sana all binabalikan. Okay. So the red ones, this was the Silk Road. It was only international, and the blue route here was global. Okay. So mula doon sa galing sa Mexico in South America, umiikot pa sila noon papunta dito sa Indian Ocean, papunta ng Singapore, and then sa Port of Manila. But there was another period where yung trading, no, itong trade route na ginagamit ng galleon, it was improved because of the opening of the canal here. Ito. So nagbukas sila ng isang daanan dito. So instead na iikot pa sila ng Indian Ocean at Atlantic Ocean, yung mga traders from Mexico, dadaan na lang sila ng Mediterranean Sea. Tapos mag-shortcut dito sa bandang Egypt. lalabas ng Indian Ocean. So, yung travel time ng trade between West and the East, it became faster. Mas naging efficient siya. So that is actually the start of global trading, the galleon trade. Another stage in global economy is mercantilism. This theory stated that a country's wealth was determined by gold reserve. Sa Pilipinas, meron tayong historical controversy, no? Yung Yamashita Treasure. Kasi ang mga Japanese soldiers, mahilig silang mag-looting. So, yun sa mga bansa na pinupuntahan nila and if they were successful in taking that country down, yung mga gold reserves ng bansa na yun, pinukuha nila. And during the ending of the World War II, itong si General Yamashita nga, hukay daw at nagtago ng mga war loots. Try nyo minsan i-search sa YouTube yung Yamashita Treasure. It was discovered by a local miner in the Mountain Province. At kung ano yung ending ng story niya, siguro i-share ko na lang yung link sa inyo later. Okay? So, gold and silver holdings daw. Ang isang bansa ay mayaman kapag mataas yung kanyang gold and silver reserve. In its simplest sense, mercantilists believe that a country should increase its holdings of gold and silver by promoting exports and discouraging imports. So, countries should focus on exports, and ang mga exports during the age of galleon and mercantilism, binabayaran yan, hindi ng pera. Binabayaran yan with silver coins and gold bars. So the objective of each country is to have a surplus at iniiwasan nila ang deficit. Surplus can be defined in mercantilist point of view as mas marami dapat ang exports than imports. So mas marami yung nabebenta kesa yung binibili. So if we apply that to our real life, mas marami dapat yung binibenta mo kesa sa nabibili. You earn more than spending. So micro-level financing yun. Micro-level. In the early 1900s naman, so yun, medyo naglalaylo na ang mercantilism. But the gold standard is still there. It was introduced in the 1900s. It was led by the UK. They focused on gold standard. Hindi na lang kasama ang silver, only on gold. The US and the rest of Europe and many countries, they wanted a standardized transaction in the booming world market. During that time kasi, yung awareness ng mga bansa on the global trading system, hindi na lang siya nationalistic. They did not focus on their own products inside their own country, but they think that in the future, especially US and Europe, magkakaroon ng global trading. And they were right. So they wanted na hindi na lang gold dapat kasi paano naman yung mga bansa na walang minahan ng ginto. So mapag-iwanan sila. This is primarily because in the World War I, dahil dun sa digmaan, maraming bansa yung naubusan ng gold. Kasi nagbenta sila sa mga bansa na nagbebenta bumili sila ng armas sa mga bansa na nagbebenta ng weapons. No? So the World War I happened. Just in review, bakit nga ba nangyari ang World War I? No? We're talking about globalization of trade here, and here comes one of the enemies of global trade in World War I, pagdaigdigang digmaan yan. The main reasons kung bakit nangyari ang World War I ay may acronym na MAIN yan. Yung M is militarism, yung A is alliances. Okay, you take note of this. Alliance. During our first module, napag-usapan natin yung unionism, that unionism will give countries an economic advantage. Pero hindi lang economic advantage ang dulot niyan, kundi military and power advantage. Kapag ikaw ay merong alliances with other countries in your region, then at times na magkakaroon ng war, mapapakinabangan mo siya. Another reason is extreme nationalism, imperialism, or yung pag-takeover ng mga mas malalaking bansa sa maliliit na bansa. And the primary reason that triggered World War I is the assassination of the Archduke of Austria. At yun ay yung nasa dyaryo na to. Ayun siya yun. Kamukha pa naman siya ni Emilio Aguinaldo. That is Archduke Ferdinand. Yes, sir. Excuse me.
What's up?
Nagsasalita ba ako kanina? Hindi pala ako naka-unmute. Ay, hindi pala ako naka-mute. Sorry.
Okay. Okay lang. Okay. Okay. So assassination of Archduke Ferdinand, yun sa Austria. It was the main trigger ng World War I. So when World War I happened, just imagine kung nabuhay tayo during the World War I and may naglili parang mga eroplano around here. Ang Amerika kasali, London kasali dyan, the European countries kasali dyan. Damay din tayo sa Asia. So anytime may babagsak na bomba. So in the height of the World War I, countries depleted their gold reserves. So they suspended the gold standard and they wanted to print money to fund military involvement. Then the Great Depression came. No? In October 29, 1929, nagkaroon ng ng depression sa Western countries and syempre affected yung buong mundo. Pag yung economic crisis lasted for at least a half a year or 2 quarters, we can refer to that as a recession. Pero pag nag-last yung economic crisis for 1 year, 2 year, or more, then we can call that the Great Depression. It was known as the Black Thursday. The stock market in US crashed because nervous investors began selling overpriced stocks. And a record of 12 million shares were traded that day. So yung mga bansa during that time, binenta nila yung mga sarili nila kasi pa-bankrupt na sila. Now, we connect the Great Depression and the gold standard. Some economists argue that the gold standard caused the Great Depression because it limited the amount of circulating money, therefore reducing investments and demand. So during that time, yung mga shares, binibenta or binibili siya gamit yung mga gold reserves ng mga countries. So economists believe na dahil konti lang yung nag-circulate na resources in the market, that is the reason why nagkaroon ng pagbaba or pagbagsak ng ekonomiya, world economy during that time. So today, ang mga transnational companies, gumagamit na sila ng US dollars as the base currency in trading. No? So pagdating sa foreign exchange, ang ating basehan ay US dollar. So $1 to 1 peso yung palitan. Yung mga OFW natin, pag nagpadala sa Pilipinas, ang gamit nila ay dolyar. And then, papapalit ninyo dito. Yung ating mga oil companies, when they import oil galing ng oil importing countries, ang gamit nila, dollars. Pag ikaw ay isang vlogger and babayaran ka ng YouTube, babayaran ka in dollars. Tapos papalitan ng piso pagdating dito. Bakit dolyar ang ginagamit natin? Ba't hindi na lang pesos? Bakit hindi tayo gumamit ng Korean won? Bakit kaya dollar? What was the primary reason kung bakit dollar ang ginagamit ng buong mundo in exchange rates? Okay. The main, sabihin na natin, mastermind for that, nangyari yan noong Bretton Woods Agreement. No? This was a time in World War II, yung mga allied nations, syempre kasama dyan ang US and lahat ng kanyang mga kaalyansa, they held a conference at tinawag nila yun na Bretton Woods Agreement. Ngayon, iniisip nila, nagkaroon ng Great Depression and natagal na natin ginagamit tong gold standard. Why don't we put up a global economic system wherein pwede tayong gumamit ng currency, standard currency. At yung standard currency that was set was the US dollar. At this is why until now, ginagamit natin yung US dollar as the standard currency. During the Bretton Woods Agreement, no, itinatag din yung IBRD or International Bank for Reconstruction and Development. Now, the IBRD and the IMF was responsible for the rehabilitation ng mga bansa which was devastated during the World War II. So nagpautang sila para ma-build up ulit. That was a primary role of IMF and IBRD to grant loans for countries that was devastated by the World War. The General Agreement on Trade and Tariffs is another international organization which was inaugurated or established after World War II. Ang purpose ng GATT or General Agreement on Trade and Tariff, minsan pinagpapalitin General Agreement on Tariff and Trade, was to eliminate harmful trade protectionism, tariffs, and other hindrances to international trade. Now, itong GATT na ito, later on, it was replaced by the World Trade Organization. The main purpose is maging referee. Halimbawa, no? Mataas yung demand natin sa face shield and face mask. Ang China ngayon i-import sa atin ng mga mask na to. And because it is in demand, tataasan niya yung presyo. So ang role ngayon ng World Trade Organization or yung dating GATT, papasok siya and then titignan niya kung makatarungan ba yung binibigay na presyo ng ibang bansa dun sa isa pang bansa. No? Another example is Japan. No? During the energy crisis of 1990s, ang Japan, siyempre, mataas yung technology nila. Marami silang mga engineers who invented innovations in terms of power generation. In-export nila yung technology nila papuntang Canada and US. And then, itong mga malalaking bansang to, they accuse Japan of overpricing ng kanilang technology. So, ang World Trade Organization, pumasok sila ngayon sa eksena in order to determine kung meron bang abuse. Kapag naman na patunayan ng World Trade Organization na yung isang bansa ay merong trade abuse, meron siyang violation in terms of world trade, meron silang binibigay na sanctions doon sa bansa. One example is yung pagbawas ng restriction in terms of trades na pumapasok or produkto or imported goods na pumapasok doon sa isang bansa. So that was the gold standard, mercantilism, galleon trade, Silk Road, the Bretton Woods Agreement. These are different stages of the development of the global economy or economic. Hello? Economic globalization. Okay, I'd like to introduce Hello? Mic test. Okay. I'd like to introduce you to the concept of neoliberalism. Okay. Napag-usapan natin kanina that the transnational companies has taken over the global economy and they are using US dollars as the base currency. Neoliberalism can be defined, sandali himay-himay natin, no? Ang keyword siguro natin dito is liberal. When we say liberal, pwede ang ibig sabihin niyan ay freedom, so malaya. Liberalism is an advocate of freedom. And itong neo na to, na dinagdag dun sa whole world, it means that there is a new kind of freedom. Ang neoliberalism is not the same as liberalism. It is often associated with Adam Smith laissez-faire economics. It is the policy that prescribes a minimal amount of government interference. Ibig sabihin yan, ang mga kumpanya na malalaki, transnational companies, they have a certain independence. Meaning, hindi na kailangan pakialaman ng gobyerno yung mga decision nila in terms of policies inside their companies, kung magkano yung presyo ng kanilang mga produkto, no? So that is what we call neoliberalism. Binabawasan yung pakikialam ng gobyerno sa transnational companies or multinational companies. Is it existing nowadays? The answer is yes. Ang mga multinational companies ngayon, they have a certain independence kasi they can actually they are what do you call this? They are motivated or they are promoted. The countries around the world go to first world countries and they invite multinational companies. Hey, sabi ni Gloria Macapagal-Arroyo, sabi ni Pinoy, sabi ni Duterte, punta kayo sa bansa namin. Invest kayo doon. And then when you invest there, we will give you certain independence to operate your business. So that is what you call neoliberalism. Maganda yung neoliberalism, but there are certain challenges, no? Isa dito yung market fundalism, another is monopoly and monopsony, the regulation, the one-size-fits-all concept, and inequality. Market fundalism, well, critics argue that advocating the use of free markets in areas such as health and education is misplaced because by nature, these are public services which are not subject to the same profit motivation. Ang ibig sabihin ng market fundamentalism, is that yung mga services that should actually be free, ginagawang business. Now, there are many private companies today na ginagawang business ang education, ginagawang business ang medicine or hospitals, ginagawang business ang daanan, tollways. These are actually dapat mga public services, but because of neoliberalism, governments gave private companies a certain independence in terms of conducting business. So itong mga businessmen na to, they took over public services and then sinisingil nila tayo and they gain profit. No? So this should be public services. This should be free. Ang tawag doon ay market fundamentalism. Another disadvantage of neoliberalism is monopoly and monopsony. These are two concepts on the relationship between consumer and producer. Of course, yung ating monopoly, overuse na to. Dati na ninyong ginagamit to. No? One example, lagi kong ginagamit na example ng monopoly is the Ajinomoto. Yung tak, tak, tak sa Ajinomoto. Meron ba kayong alam na ibang brand ng monosodium glutamate or betching?
Ano ako?
Wala, no? So, Ajinomoto holds the sole distributorship of pure monosodium glutamate in the world. Kapag merong isang kumpanya na gusto magbenta ng MSG, kailangan nilang bayaran yung uh, trademark and copyright ng Ajinomoto. And that amount is so big that no other companies did dare to compete with Ajinomoto. Yan. So, may patalastas ako dito. Ano nga bang history ng Ajinomoto? Ang Ajinomoto formulation, it was started in 1899 to 1908 nung yung isang Japanese chemist, si Kupanei Ikeda, nag-aral siya sa Germany ng chemistry. Pagdating niya doon sa Germany, nakita niya yung mga German, ang lalaki nila, ang tatangkad, tatangos ng ilong, ang lalaki ng katawan. And then, Kikune Ikeda thought to himself, sabi niya, bakit kaya yung mga Germans ang gaganda ng build ng katawan samantalang kaming mga Japanese ay napakaliit ng katawan tsaka ng height, maliit. So sabi ni Ikeda, based on his research in Germany, it was about their diet. There is something wrong about the diet of the Japanese kung bakit ang mga Japanese ay maliliit at ang mga Germans ay malalaki. And during nung pagbalik niya ng Japan, habang sila ay kumakain ng konbu, no? Itong konbu ay isang uri ng halamang dahon na sa Japan ay pinapakuluan yan, tapos yun yung kanilang pampalasa. Nang habang kumakain sila, sabi ni Kikone dun sa kanyang anak, anak, ano ba yung mga kinds of taste? Sabi niya. So yung isang anak niya, sabi niya, bitter or mapait. Yung isa, sabi ng isang anak ay sweet. Yung isa sabi sour. Yung isa sabi niya salty. Tapos sabi ni Ikeda, do you have other kinds of taste? Do you know any other kinds of taste? Sabi niya. Tapos habang sila'y kumakain ng konbu, yung lasa ba ng konbu, sabi niya sa kanyang pamilya, does it fall in any of the categories of taste? No? Hindi siya matamis, hindi siya maalat, hindi siya mapait, hindi siya maasim. So doon na pumasok sa isip ni Ikeda yung fifth taste. So sweet, sour, salty, bitter. 4 lang yun, no? So si Kikone Ikeda ang nakadiskubre or nakaimbento ng pang-5 lasa. At ang tawag dun sa lasa na yun ay umami. Umami is the distinct taste of Ajinomoto. That is why yung label ng Ajinomoto ay umami seasoning. Nung una, ang Ajinomoto ay gawa sa wheat. Tapos dahil mas mahal ang production cost ng wheat, naging soybean. Now, itong soybean na to, meron silang L-type amino acids na yun yung pinaprocess ng planta para maging amino acid. Ngayon, merong controversy ng Ajinomoto kasi sinasakop niya ang buong mundo, no? Ajinomoto holds the monopoly in terms of monosodium glutamate. Now, itong monosodium glutamate, nung pagdating nito sa Amerika, syempre yung mga Western chef, Western companies, nagtaas sila ng kilay ngayon. Kasi meron silang pagka-racist eh. Kaming mga Western, nang tagal na namin sinasabi na 4 lang ang lasa. Tapos ngayon darating itong mga Japanese, mga Asian, sasabihin nila, hindi, meron pang 5 lasa. At yun ang umami. Nung una, hindi tinanggap ng Western countries ang Ajinomoto. Pero later on, maraming chef na din yung gumamit ng umami seasoning. But yung mga critics ng Ajinomoto, pinauso nila yung CRS or yung Chinese Restaurant Syndrome. Sa atin, meron tayong sariling version ng Chinese Restaurant Syndrome. Kapag yung isang pagkain daw na kinain mo, ang sasabihin sa'yo, especially sa Pampanga, no? Sasabihin sa'yo, may betchin ka. Ibig sabihin, pagkatapos mo kumain, sumasakit yung ulo mo, nahihilo ka, nagiging para kang high, no? Ibig sabihin daw yun, na betchin ka. Ang tawag sa Western countries ay Chinese Restaurant Syndrome. May pagka-racist na naman to, no? Kasi Chinese restaurant, so ibig sabihin, pag kumain ka sa Chinese restaurant, merong kang sakit na makukuha. Pero doon sa mga research na kinonduct naman, ang MSG was safe to consume generally. So that's the story of Ajinomoto, yung may monopoly in terms of monosodium glutamate. No? Kasi ang definition ng monopoly is there's only one company who sells a certain product. No? So walang ibang seller. Meron lang isang exclusive. Another example of monopoly is this one, Facebook. Ang Facebook ni Mark Zuckerberg. In 2015, 2015 hanggang 17, Mark Zuckerberg was the youngest billionaire in the world. So, yung kanyang Facebook. Seemingly kasi ang Facebook holds the monopoly in terms of a holistic. No? So, complete package na social media. Kasi ang Instagram, ang focus niyan is on pictures. Ang Twitter, ang focus niyan is on thread. No? So, pero ang Facebook, nandyan ang pictures, nandyan ang videos, nandyan yung mga pwede kang gumamit ng gumawa ng threads and your reactions to the content. No? So, Facebook pa rin yung pinakamalaki as of today. Microsoft, itong logo na to, Microsoft also holds the monopoly in terms of operating system until dumating ang Apple. Pero ang Microsoft kasi, yan yung pang operating system na pang masa, ang Apple yung pang rich kid. YouTube also holds the title of being the monopoly in terms of video hosting na pwede ka mag-earn. No? Napakalaking company din ng YouTube. Pagdating sa vlogging, syempre sa YouTube ka. Pag-create ng content, sa YouTube ka. There is also, aside from monopoly, wherein there is only one seller, meron ding tinatawag na oligopoly. Ibig sabihin ng oligopoly is that there are only a few companies that offer a certain product or services. At ang example niyan in the Philippines is yung Free TV. National Free TV, which was dominated by TV5, GMA, and ABS-CBN. Kaya lang nag-expire yung franchise ng ABS-CBN, no? So nawala ang ABS-CBN. So ilan na lang yung dominant na free TV station sa Pilipinas ngayon? Meron na lang tayong dalawa, which is GMA and TV5. Ang tawag naman ngayon dito dun sa product na dalawa lang ang nagbebenta is duopoly. So you have three terms: monopoly, duopoly, and oligopoly. In terms of telecommunication, meron din tayong oligopoly. We have Globe and Smart. Smart is owned by PLDT, which is also owned by MVP, Manny V. Pangilinan. Itong Globe naman ay sa mga Ayala. Dati meron tayong isa pang telecom company, yung Sun, no? Ang hirap magsulat sa mouse. Sun Cellular. Yung Sun Cellular, it was acquired by Smart to obtain oligopoly. At ngayon, yung hinihintay natin, yung ito, dito tayo, bida ang saya. Okay. bidang saya. Dito, community. Yan. Yan yung tinatayo ng mga cell sites ngayon. Ano pa yung mga alam ninyo na monopoly, duopoly, and oligopoly?
Meralco.
Oh, tama. Sa Manila, walang choice ang mga residente doon, no? Kundi, meron ba dito taga-NCR? Okay, mukhang wala. Pero kung taga-NCR ka, wala kang ibang electric service provider kung hindi Meralco. So, if Meralco decides to increase the prices of their electric service, may choice ba tayo? No? So, wala kang choice because there is a monopoly. Pagdating naman sa water service, no, meron lang dalawa dyan, yung Maynilad tsaka Manila Water. Itong dalawang to, they are concessionaires actually, no? Ibig sabihin ng concessionaire, pag-aari ng gobyerno, pag-aari ng estado, pag-aari natin yung resources and then pinaparentahan natin dun sa mga private companies yung resources natin. Ano? And then ibebenta nila sa mga tao, babayaran natin. That is another example of market fundamentalism and also an example of duopoly. No? Yung water service. Sa atin actually, the state owns the resources. But private companies rent them and then sell it to us. Tapos babayaran natin. Market fundamentalism. It should be free. So tapos na tayo sa monopoly. Ibig sabihin ng monopoly, there is only one seller and walang choice yung mga consumer. Now let's go to monopsony. Ang ibig sabihin ng monopsony, mono, iisa lang, at iisa lang yung bumibili. Okay? Kung sa monopoly, iisa lang yung nagbebenta, sa monopsony, iisa lang yung bumibili. One example is, let's go to Bukidnon. Sa Bukidnon, meron diyang mga taniman ng pinya. No? So yung kanilang mga sakahan, hindi palay ang tinatanim doon, kundi pinya. Ngayon, yung mga pineapple farmers, when they plant pineapples, they don't only sell them to the public market. They sell them to the middlemen. At itong mga middlemen na to ay ibebenta sa Del Monte. Okay? So Del Monte is a multinational company and there is monopsony. What do I mean with monopsony? Ang Del Monte, kapag sinabi niya na, hey, mababa ang demand ng pinya sa ngayon. So hindi ko pwedeng bilhin yung mga pinya ninyo ng katulad ng presyo natin last year. For example, ang presyo natin last year was 15 pesos per kilo. Sa ngayon, dahil mababa ang demand, bibilhin ko na lang yan ng 10 pesos per kilo. May choice ba yung farmer? Ang farmer, namumuhunan yan ng utang. No? Mangungutang yan ng pagbinhi, mangungutang yan ng pangrenta ng farm equipment, mangungutang yan ng pataba. Tapos darating yung time na mababa ang demand, pag nagbenta siya sa palengke, baka hindi niya mabenta, so masisira, malulugi siya. Ngayon, dumating itong isang kumpanya, Del Monte, kunwari, no? Sabihin niya, yan, bilhin ko yan, 10 pesos. Nag-iisip ngayon yung farmer. Kaysa naman masira yung aking mga tinanim, malugi ako, pwede na siguro to, bawi-bawi lang ng puhunan. So papayag siya ngayon dun sa deal na pinipresent nung kumpanya, which is, example is Del Monte. That is monopsony. Yung seller, wala siyang choice kundi ibenta sa iisang seller. That is monopsony. Another example is, ito, yung ating mga rice farmers. Again, farmers lagi. No? Bakit nalulugi ang Pilipinong magsasaka? Ang magsasaka natin, sana ganyan sila, no? Meron silang nalubat yung headphones ko. Okay, ang mga magsasaka sana natin ay merong ganyan na facilities, equipments, no, automatic planter, tsaka harvester, meron din sana silang ito. Ito yung technology ngayon sa agriculture yung drone sprayer. So instead na yung ating mga magsasaka magiging mag-manual pa, so meron na silang automatic drone na sprayer sana. Kaso mga magsasaka natin manual pa rin. Magtanim ay di biro, maghapong nakayupo. Ayan. Yan si Kuyang magsasaka. Maghapong nakayupo. Tapos instead sana na naka-drone na yung mga farmers natin, manual pa rin silang nag-i-spray, nasisinghot tuloy nila yung chemicals, nagiging high sila pag uwi nila ng bahay. Alright, rock and roll. Yun. Malakas yung tama. Sabi ni Cynthia Villar, ito paborito kong senator to, si Cynthia Villar. Meron nga akong poster ni Cynthia Villar ngayon dito. Ayan. Kasama niyo yung kanyang penoy. Ito si Cynthia Villar. Yan. Secretary Dar. Ayan. Kasama niyo yung kanyang anak, si Mark Villar, secretary ng DPWH. Paborito ko to Si Cynthia Villar, naging controversial yan kasi tinira niya yung mga farmers, tinira niya yung mga nurses, tinira niya yung mga health workers, tinira niya yung mga teachers, tinira niya yung mga researchers. Medyo nakakarami na siya. Pero Senator Villar is still the chair of the Senate Committee on Agriculture and Food. Sabi ni Cynthia Villar, yung buwis na makukuha natin sa mga imported rice, by the way, this is about rice tarification law. No? Kasi ang pinupunto nung slide ko is that bakit nga ba ang mga magsasaka ay nalulugi? Bakit sila naghihirap? Dagdag na pasakit sa kanila itong rice tarification law. Tarification is a globalization term. No? If you remember, ang tariff or taripa, this is a tax which is collected on imported goods. And one example of imported good is rice. No? Pero according to Senator Villar, yung buwis na makukuha natin sa imported rice, ibibigay sa mga farmers para tulungan sila maging competitive through mechanization, through inbred seed production, through cheap credit or pautang, at training sa TESDA. O, di ba? Ang ganda pakinggan. Pero the truth is this. Ang mga farmers na Pilipino, napipilitan silang ibenta ng mura yung kanilang mga harvest na bigas. Bakit? Sa rice tarification law, wala nang limit on rice importation. So, ibig sabihin, ang competition between local rice and imported rice, napakahigpit. Pero sino ang talo? Yung ating rice farmers, mas mahal ang puhunan nila. Yung mga imported rice, mas mura. So, saan pupunta ngayon yung ating mga consumers? Pupunta sila dun sa mas mura na rice at kawawa ang ating farmers. The reason is that there is monopsony. Ang monopsony doon is yung mga komersante or mga businessman na bumibili ng mga palay ng ating mga farmers. Siyempre, yung mga businessman na yan, binabarat ngayon nila. Yung ating existing na market price kasi ng local rice is mababa. So walang choice ng mga farmers kundi ibenta na lang ito dun sa mga middlemen. Okay, so that is monopoly and monopsony. Another disadvantage or challenge to neoliberalism is deregulation. No? So what is deregulation? First, let us define it literally. Ang root word ng deregulation is to regulate. Ibig sabihin ng regulate, kontrolin. Bigyan mo ng policies that will limit them. Meron siyang prefix na de, meaning tanggalin or bawasan. Ibig sabihin ngayon ng deregulation is tanggalin yung control. Tatanggalin mo ngayon yung control mo dun sa isang TNC, for example, that is operating inside your country. The regulation is being practiced by the government. Kasi ang pwede lang naman mag-control sa isang kumpanya na nagbi-business is yung gobyerno. The regulation had not necessarily help economic development but instead help contributed to increased financial inequality. Bakit siya nagko-contribute sa financial inequality? Okay, let's discuss that. This is Petron. Okay? Ano ba ang Petron? Uh, ang Petron ay isa sa mga major oil players sa Pilipinas, no? And I hope you know na ang Petron ay dating pag-aari ng gobyerno. Nagsimula ang history ng Petron in the 1920s. Ang pangalan pa lang niyan lagi ay Standard Vacuum Oil Company or Stanvac. No? Stanvac, pag-aari ng mga Amerikano. Ngayon, siyempre, yung company naturally nag-evolve yan. During the time of Marcos, nabili ng gobyerno yung Stanvac at pinalitan yun ang pangalan ng Stanvac ng Philippine Petroleum Corporation. Pagdating ni President Ramos, nagkaroon ng Oil Deregulation Law. Yan. Highlight natin, deregulation law. During the time of President Fidel V. Ramos, naipasa ang Oil Deregulation Law. Ibig sabihin ng deregulation law is that the government will lessen the control on the operation of oil players in the country, yung presyo nila, mababawasan yung control ng gobyerno. No? So dati, ang presyo ng paglangis or gasolina sa Petron, mura yan kasi nga gobyerno ang may-ari. Pero when private companies took over, so binili ng private company ang Petron at nagkaroon ng oil deregulation law. Now, that was the start ng pagtaas ng presyo ng gasolina. Another example of deregulation is yung deregulation ng tuition fees of universities. In the 1990s, kinokontrol ng gobyerno ang tuition fee ng mga private universities. Ibig sabihin yan, hindi basta-basta nag-a-adjust ng tuition fee ang mga private universities kung hindi papayagan ng gobyerno. But because of the deregulation of tuition fees of private universities, these private universities were given certain independence in terms of the management ng kanilang presyo ng tuition fees. Kaya nga merong isang educational plan, yung College Assurance Plan, CAP. Sikat na sikat ang CAP noon, pero dahil sa deregulation ng tuition fees ng university, nagtaasan ng tuition fee yung mga private universities, hindi na-foresee ng CAP yung taas ng tuition fee, nalugi sila. So that is deregulation. The giving of certain independence to companies at pagbaba ng regulation, lessening of control of the government. The one-size-fits-all concept. This is an important problem for neoliberalism because policies which may work in one country doesn't necessarily work in all countries. Halimbawa, sa neoliberalism, yung gobyerno, bibigyan niya ng kalayaan yung isang kumpanya. Ngayon, yung isang kumpanya na to, ganun din yung gagawin niya sa ibang bansa, which is a poorer country. Hindi naman applicable yung mga policies in richer countries, they are not applicable in third world countries. Because magkaiba yung standards of living ng mga dalawang bansa na to. Inequality. Kanina sinasabi ko yung disadvantage ng monopoly, monopsony, deregulation. No? When you have no choice but to avail of a basic product, halimbawa electricity, sabi ni Juan Rafael kanina, when you have no choice, then it follows na there will be an income equality. Those with low income have limited spending power. Halimbawa, ang presyo ng electricity, for example, ay 15 pesos per kilowatt hour at ang monthly bill mo will be 1,500 per month. Yung mga mas malaki ang kita na pamilya, mas may kakayahan sila na i-avail yung basic service na yun kasi doon sa mas mahirap na pamilya. And if we are going to apply that on a macro level, yung mga pautang ng IMF dun sa mga richer countries na mas may kakayahan magbayad, same lang din ng terms ng mga pautang nila dun sa mga mahihirap na bansa like Philippines na maliit lang yung income. So, mas konti yung pakayahan natin na magbayad. Yun ang ibig sabihin ng one size fits all. Yung policy na in-apply mo sa isang mayaman na bansa, in-apply mo din sa isang mahirap na bansa. Dito papasok yung ano eh, yung difference ng equality and equity. Ibig sabihin ng equality, halimbawa, merong dalawang tao na pumunta sa'yo, tapos pareho silang nauuhaw. Yung isang tao, naglakad siya ng 10 kilometers. Yung isa na lumapit sa'yo, naglakad siya ng 20 kilometers. Binigyan mo ngayon sila ng tig-isang baso ng tubig. Tawag doon, equality. Kasi pareho ko silang binigyan ng tig-isang basong tubig. Pero kung yung tao na mas malayo ang nilakad, binigyan mo ng 1 litrong tubig, tapos yung tao na mas konti ang nilakad, binigyan mo rin ng mas konti na tubig, then you can call that equity. Kung ano yung deserve niya, yun yung makukuha niya. Okay? Another phenomenon is the stagflation. This is a combination of two terms eh. Stagnant and inflation. Ano ibig sabihin ng inflation? This is a natural phenomenon ng mga presyo ng mga bilihin which steadily, consistent yan na tumataas ng tumataas every year. And when there is a steady increase in prices of products and there is slow economic growth, that can be called as stagflation. It happened in the early 1970s. So yun yung stagflation. May isang term dito na nabanggit eh, yung embargo. Ibig sabihin ng embargo is a ban on importation or trade. Halimbawa, ang OPEC, there was a time in 1970s na ang Organization of Petroleum Exporting Countries, meron silang rivalry with the US because of, meron ding Gulf War. Ang ginawa ng OPEC, binawasan nila yung mga amount of oil na ine-export to the world. Meaning, yung supply ng oil around the world ay napakababa and it follows the law of supply and demand. Kapag mababa yung supply, mataas ang presyo. So during that time, nung nagkaroon ng embargo ang OPEC, nagkaroon ng oil crisis worldwide. So makapangyarihan ng OPEC kung tutuusin mo. No? Ang mga members ng OPEC is Iran, Iraq, Kuwait, Saudi Arabia, and Venezuela. Ito yung mga founding countries. And later on, nag-member din ang Qatar, India, Libya, United Arab Emirates, Algeria, Nigeria, Gabon, Angola, Equatorial Guinea, and Democratic Republic of Congo. Now, what are the benefits of international trade? Hinighlight ko ng yellow yung mga keywords para makuha lang natin yung mga important terms. No? Exports create jobs and boost economic growth. Sabihin yan, pag nag-export ka ng mga products, mas dumarami yung mga trabaho kasi lumalaki yung kumpanya, lumalaki yung produkto mo. No? Sa ngayon, ang isa sa mga pinaka-in-demand na trabaho, which is basic, is yung delivery services. Napakaraming naglabasan na logistic provider. Nandiyan ang Grab, nandiyan ang JNT Express, dati ng LBC, nandiyan ang Lalamove, Transportify, lahat-lahat ng mga to, or Ninja Van, GoGo Express, lahat ng mga to are logistics services which were created because of exportation. Because of exportation of products from China, no? Pinakamalaki ang China. Nakakapag-generate tayo ng mas maraming trabaho. Another benefit of international trade is they give local companies experience. No? Halimbawa, Jollibee started as a small restaurant, pero McDonald's came, tapos nagkaroon ng competition between them. Now, yung Jollibee ngayon, pwede siyang mag-benchmark or pwede niyang gayahin yung mga standards na sinet ng isang international or foreign company at i-apply niya dun sa local market. Halimbawa dyan, yung Saraw, gumagawa ng PUJ or jeepney. Ang competition ng Saraw is yung mga foreign car makers, Toyota, Ford, Mitsubishi, Chevrolet, at kung ano-ano pa. Now, ang Saraw, from being a traditional vehicle maker, pwede siyang gumaya doon sa mga technologies na dala nung international trade, no? Yung dala ng mga foreign companies. Ang Saraw ngayon, meron na din silang Euro 4 compliant engine. Maglalagay na din sila ng aircon sa kanilang mga jeep. Meron na din sila mga prototypes ng modern jeepney. No? Yan ang isang advantage ng international trade. Ang isang local company, pwede siyang gumaya sa mga magandang technology ng foreign companies. Another benefit of international trade is efficiency. Trade also makes companies more efficient. Halimbawa, the Southeast Asia, no, region, merong isang type of product dyan. Mag-isip tayo ng isang example ng type ng isang produkto. Magsabi nga kayo ng isang produkto na pwede natin gawing business in the region. Ito na lang. Oh. Kunwari, gagawa tayo ng isang brand ng Bluetooth headphones. Ang main office natin is in the Philippines. Instead of manufacturing all the headphones here in the Philippines, magtatayo na lang ako ng planta sa Malaysia, isang planta sa Indonesia, isang planta sa Korea, and then yung mga subsidiaries ko na yon or yung mga pilot manufacturing plants ko, doon na lang manggagaling yung mga produkto na i-distribute doon sa bansang yon. Meaning, makakatipid ako sa shipping ng mga produkto na mga supposedly manggagaling lahat sa Pilipinas and then i-distribute sa buong region. In terms of efficiency, makakatipid tayo. Imports allow foreign competition to reduce prices for consumers. Ang trading, ang pinaka-advantage niyan is sa ating mga local consumers. Kasi kapag mas maraming foreign products na pumakasok sa isang bansa, yung presyo ng mga bilihin mas bumababa. Halimbawa, no? May mga mask na made in the Philippines. May mga mask din na made from other countries. Kapag yung nagsisirculate lang na product ay galing sa Pilipinas, mas mahal yung presyo niya kasi may monopoly. Pero pag mas maraming competitors na pumasok, mas mura nating mabibili yung mga products. During the ECQ in March and April, napakamahal ng face mask. Umabot siya ng 700 per box. Pero look at the prices of face mask right now. Mabibili mo na lang siya ng 50 pesos. Ganun nakamura. Because marami ng mga importers ang nagpasok nung same na product dito sa Pilipinas. Ang benefit nun is sa ating mga consumers. Next. It also gives shoppers a wider variety. Mas marami tayong pagpipilian. And it promotes dynamism and innovation. Yung mga companies natin, mas nagiging creative sila. Halimbawa, dati, tripod lang ang meron tayo. Tapos merong nagbenta ng ring light. Tapos merong nagbenta ng tripod na may kasamang charger. Tapos may isang kumpanya, pinagsama-sama niya lahat ng yon. Naging tripod, may ring light, may charger na din. Di ba? So companies are becoming more dynamic and innovative because of international trade. Now the disadvantages. Hindi naman puro pakinabang lang ang meron sa international trade. Meron din tayong mga setbacks or disadvantages. One of which is child labor. Because of international trade, because of presence of industrial companies or industries, tumataas din yung cases ng poverty. And because of poverty, dumarami din yung mga bata na at the young age ay nagtatrabaho, or that is the phenomenon which is called child labor. Embargoes, nasabi ko na kanina yung embargo, yung isang mga samahan ng bansa, pwede silang mag-declare ng ban or on importation. Job outsourcing is another Bakit disadvantage ang job outsourcing? Perhaps ang isa sa mga effect ng job outsourcing is when yung salary or wages ng mga outsourcing employees sa Pilipinas is sobrang baba, binabara. Dahil nga mababa ang salary or wages sa Pilipinas. It reduces jobs in domestic industries that can compete on a global scale. Yung mga maliliit na industriya, maliliit na kumpanya ng sapatos sa Marikina, for example, dahil marami pumapasok mga imported goods from international trade, dahil hindi sila makapag-compete sa mga international brands, nalulugi sila. Countries with traditional economic systems will be affected immensely. Yung mga country na sanay sa traditional industries like the regions of in Africa, yung mga poor regions in the Philippines, may mga economic shock na nangyayari dyan sa mga yan kapag biglang may pumapasok na malaking kumpanya. No, halimbawa, dito sa Pampanga na lang, no, may mga indigenous peoples ancestral domain. Yung mga lupain na pag-aari ng mga Ayutas, for example. There are investments na tinatayo sa mga lupain ng mga katutubo here in Pampanga, and then nagiging malaking issue yun kasi supposedly hindi pwedeng bilhin yun ng kahit sino man. Only the indigenous peoples ang may karapatan doon. But well, the problem exists na nakakaya ng mga big companies to take over these pieces of lands for international trade. So those are the advantages and disadvantages of international trade. Okay, can we have a recap? Mag-recap tayo kasi last slide na yun. Recap tayo. Okay. So international trade, this is the continuous exchange of products between different countries of the world. Okay. Silk Road, na-discuss natin ang Silk Road. Na-discuss natin ang after ng Silk Road. Age of exploration, mercantilism, the gold standard. After that, yung Bretton Woods Agreement, which assigned US dollar as the base currency. And then, na-discuss natin yung advantages and disadvantages of international trade, monopoly and monopsony, duopoly and oligopoly. So, do you have any question? May question ba?
Wala po.
Wala po.
Okay, stop ko na yung recording. No?